Thanks.
There you go.
Like I said, my name is Marucheau, and my presentation this morning is my tour of duty in Vietnam as an OMC of a swift boat from October 1969 to September 1970.
Mike, louder.
Yeah, Lou. Wow.
The mic just went on.
It's turned on.
Okay.
You can turn it up.
Mike, can you turn the light on there?
Oh.
Speaker light?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Very good.
Okay, as I was saying, this presentation is going to be about my one-year tour of duty in Vietnam from October 1969 to September 1970. Before I get into the actual tour, there are a couple things I want to do about the history. Get the next slide here. Okay. Oh, there we go. There we go. The Navy in Vietnam, there were basically three major task forces that were involved in Vietnam. Task Force 115 was called the Marucheau. It patrolled the coastline to interdict infiltration from North Vietnam down to the south. The Task Force 116 were the game wardens. Those were primarily PBRs, and they basically operated in the Mekong Delta up the rivers. The last one was the Mobile Rivering Force, Task Force 117. This was a joint Army-Navy group with assault craft and using Army troops to basically attack VC positions within the Delta. The picture you have in the bottom there actually it's the Vietnam Unit Memorial that's at the Navy Amphibious Base in Coronado, California. And they actually have a representation of each of the three task forces. There's a PBR swift boat, which is actually it is 104, and then a command and control boat from the MRF. Going the wrong way here. The market time operation was one in which they had basically I said they patrolled the coast. They had different barriers. The most innermost barrier was patrolled by PCFs. That was the inshore barrier. They were all attached to what was called Coastal Squadron 1, COSRON 1, and they operated in 5 coastal divisions. I operated from COSDIV 13 at Catlow and COSDIV 11 from Antoy. There was another division, COSDIV 16, that in 1967 operated, but it was disestablished after about 6 months. The one thing about the market time, it was extremely effective. Turned out that they really were able to stop a lot of the infiltration by trawlers coming down from North Vietnam. Consequently, North Vietnam shifted their supply. They used the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They also used the port of Sihanoukville in Cambodia to bring material into Cambodia and then infiltrate it into the Delta. As a result of that, Admiral Zumwalt, who was the commander of Naval Forces Vietnam, set up what he called the Sea Lords operation. This stands for Southeast Asia Lake, Ocean, River Strategy, or River Delta Strategy. They were able to, they tried to get the letters in there, so that's sort of funny. The map there does show the whole Mekong Delta. The Mekong, what you find is COSDIV 13 operated primarily at Sadek, and they operated on the 3 branches of the Mekong. It's the Mito, Hamlong, and Cochin rivers. There was also a river west of the Mekong called the Basak. There were operations there. The COSDIV 11 actually went up into Ha Tien, which is on the border with Cambodia, and they operated in the Yangtan River and the Vinte Canal. They also sent PCFs into the Kowloon River and the Kamau Peninsula, and they did incursions in there because this was basically a big VC area. The town of Nam Can actually was destroyed during Tet of '68, and what the Navy wanted to do is that they wanted to go ahead and insert presence there so the people would come back. Okay, my journey began, I was on the USS Walker, a DD-517. It's a World War II Fletcher-class destroyer. I was a gunnery officer. It got decommissioned and got sold to the Italian Navy, and then I was sent to Vietnam. with some other, with the other junior officers also. I did 10 weeks training at what's called the Naval Inshore Operations Training Center, which is at Mare Island at Vallejo in California. The reason they picked that and they shifted away from Coronado was because of this. There was an area just east of Mare Island that had these sloughs, called the Suisun Sloughs, and so the terrain was actually very much similar to some of the terrain in the Delta, so they moved the operations there. I did do Vietnamese language training, which I actually needed, because for most of my tour, we never had an interpreter on board. The one probably significant item there was a 1-week Siri training. And for anybody who went over in country with the Navy, pilots included, they had to go through this. It was basically survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. And it was basically a 1 week where the last 3 or 4 days you wound up in a prison camp, and you basically were subjected to pretty much what you would be in a real prison camp. We were put in boxes where you couldn't stand up or lay down. We were interrogated. We were tortured. I actually was waterboarded, courtesy of the U.S. Navy. And I can tell you it's non-lethal, but it's not fun. So anyway, so then we were going to Vietnam. The next slide will tell you a little bit of what we operated on. The 3 boats that I had were all what's called PCF Mark I's. That was the vast majority of the boats in Vietnam were these Mark I's. They were 50 feet long, 13 feet wide, had a 5-foot draft. They could do, they had big Detroit Marine diesel engines, could do 32 knots, although loaded more like 25 knots. They were pretty heavily armed. They had twin 50 caliber machine guns above the pilot house. At their fantail, they had an 81 millimeter mortar that was trigger fired. You could actually fire it directly at your target. You could drop rounds in it just like a regular mortar. Had a 50 caliber machine gun on top of it. In the bow, we didn't really have a facility for that, but we just had a person that would sit in our little peak tank where we used to keep our ropes. He would sit in there and have usually an M60 machine gun. So had a lot of firepower. So the PCFs were aluminum, so they were not armored. So our defense was speed and firepower.
What was what a PCF? What is PCF?
Yeah, PCF stands for Patrol Craft Fast. Although technically they changed the designation, they kept the initials, but it became Patrol Craft Inshore. That was the designation of that. Any other question?
The difference in size from a PCF to a PT boat from World War II?
They were much bigger. The PT boat's much bigger. Oh yeah, much bigger. Yeah. Okay. One thing about the boats, by this time in 1969, the COSDIV 11 and 13 boats, which were going up in the rivers, they were all painted green, like the PBRs. So my arrival there, we flew out of McCord and landed in Cambron Bay, which was the headquarters of Cosron 1. I was then transferred to COSDIV 13 down at Catlow. The pictures there, COSDIV 13, the black cats. That's a picture of Catlow. Catlow was actually a really nice little base. They actually had housing where you could sleep. They had bunks. It was open sleeping. They had a chow hall, and they had an officers club. So it was pretty interesting. When we got to COSDIV 13 in Catlow, I was then we issued jungle greens and jungle boots because we were basically going up in the rivers. I found out after I got there that the boat I was assigned to, PCF 17, had just been ambushed. It was on a mission it was between the mouths of the Cochin and Hamelong rivers. It's basically it was right in here, which was VC controlled. And they wound up, it was called a secret zone, Tan Phu secret zone, and they were ambushed. It was a B-41. Most of the rockets that were shot in Vietnam by the VC were B-40s, which is the Russian RPG-2. This was a heat round and was basically the equivalent to the Russian RPG-7. They were used against tanks. the boat 17, they shot the B-41 rocket. It hit the hull and basically melted the hull, went through it. It went completely through the cast iron engine block of the port engine and went into the cast iron block of the starboard engine. So these B-41s were very powerful heat rounds.
That's what HEAT stands for.
What I mean is basically high energy.
High explosive anti-tank.
And it was mainly anti-tank, but what it did is it basically concentrated the force of the rocket into a very thin area and actually drove into the area. This is actually part of the PCF-17 hull that I recovered after they got back to Catlow. Okay, so then they did repair the boat pretty quickly. There is a Catlow Naval Support Activity Detachment that did the repairs. I then went up to SEDEC. The two top slides show the base at SEDEC. It's a very small naval support activity. We tied up at a pier. We actually had to cross a bridge in the canal to get to our boats and to get to the boat there. We might ask, why did we stay there for a month? And so one question is, why did you stay there for a month? Because the rivers were here, Catlow was here. Wouldn't it be easier just to go to Catlow instead of staying up at SEDEC? Well, it turned out that this was during a northeast monsoon. And what happens then is the northeast monsoon, the winds and waves are going directly from Catlow to the mouths of the rivers. These were really pretty terrible weather. The waves were 10 to 12 or 8 to 12 foot high. The top of our pilot house was only 10 feet. The more dangerous part is the swells were 5 seconds apart. So the waves were like every 5 seconds. So you couldn't just drive along. What you had to do is use your engines. Basically, you'd come up in a wave, you had to back down and make sure you didn't plow your bow into the wave in front of you, because that actually happened to a boat up north, and they basically hit a wave, they capsized and sank. So it was very dangerous. So we stayed at SEDEC the whole time. We did primarily single boat operations. We would go out for 2 to 3 days at a time, primarily checking water traffic. We were out 24/7. We were out all the time, patrolled day and night. There were some individual operations we did. For example, MedCap is we would take a doctor or nurse to a village that needed some medical help. We did what's called H&I gunfire mission. They would give us coordinates, and then we did harassment and interdiction mortar fire. So they would give us coordinates. They said the VC is supposed to be here, and we would mortar those areas. We also did what were called waterborne guard posts. Those are actually, it's a euphemism for an ambush, essentially. That's what that was. Of our operations, like I said, most of them were basically just inspecting traffic, going on board, checking papers, inspecting the boats. We did have a couple of what I called the Sea Lords. One of the more important ones was this night insertion in a small river that's off of the Cochin. One thing about PCFs is they were very noisy. They had these big marine diesel engines with these flappers on the exhaust, and it just was extremely noisy when they were moving around. So what we did is we got a Coast Guard WPB. That's an 82-foot Coast Guard boat. It's much bigger, has bigger engines, it's louder. So the WPB went up the river. We followed it to PCFs, and then we would beach, basically to set up an ambush. As we went in, we knew that they knew we were coming, because ahead of us you could see these green tracers go up in the air. The Viet Cong had green tracers, the Americans and South Vietnamese had red tracers. So you could always tell, if you saw green tracers, you knew that was the bad guys. Went up there. We thought they wouldn't do anything, but there was a sampan that went in there, and it was ambushed there. Okay, so after we were there for a month, and then after that we were went back to Catlow. We were assigned to a special operation. They believed that there would be some infiltration from Cambodia down the coast of Vietnam. So basically from Cambodia down the coast into the U Minh Forest. The U Minh Forest was a VC stronghold. It had been that way since the Viet Minh. It had always been the VC stronghold. In fact, there's a legend that a French parachute battalion went in there, never came out. So anyhow, it was completely under VC control. That map is dated about just before Tet of '68. And what happened is, again, this is all VC controlled. What happened is Namcan was attacked by the VC, and then after that date, the whole Kamau Peninsula was pretty much Viet Cong. You also notice in the river areas there, those were all Viet Cong controlled as well. The Yumen forest was, still is, one of the largest mangrove forests in the world. So what we did, we were sent to a place called Sanandak. Sanandak is down here, and we were based on LST. The LST provided us with fuel, but our operations were to patrol for 53 miles north of Sanandak. So even though we had a base there, we didn't spend any time there. We simply were there to refuel. There were 4 PCFs that patrolled that 53 miles. We patrolled day and night, usually 2 during the day and 2 during the night. That was kind of the basic area. The U.S. actually sent some additional PCFs further north, up in this area, to expand the patrol. But along the Yumen forest, that was the patrol that we did. Our basic aim for that was 2 things. Number one is to enforce a restricted zone. They wanted nobody to get closer than 3 kilometers. The reason being is that way, if you saw anybody close to the beach, then they were probably the bad guys. The other thing we did is we searched watercraft. Did a lot of searches. Some people were detained, but to be honest, there wasn't a lot. We didn't really capture a lot, except for rice. PCF 17 actually captured a sampan, had 3,500 pounds of rice. And we took them into to Sanandak. Go back to that picture there. That was this advanced tactical support base that was in the mouth of the river. We took it to the naval intelligence officer. He told us later that that was a VC operation moving food into the Yumen forest. The one thing I note, while we were out there, this is still a northeast monsoon, so it was wet and got rainy, that kind of thing, and windy. We were patrolling one night, in the middle of the night, we had a sampan come out from the forest and basically asked to chew hoi. That was a government, it was a program by the Vietnamese government to convince Viet Cong to come over to the government side. And they were given what was called a passport, safe conduct pass to basically get safe conduct through the U.S. and Vietnamese troops. The one thing about this operation, we were out there for 2 months. One thing that actually was the one thing that was good is because our operation area was so large, we didn't always go back and forth to the LST. So we would try, if we had a break during the day, we would go, there was an island called Hon Hio, which looked there, it's basically like this little, looked like a South Pacific island, white beach. It was an island far away from the coast, so therefore there were really no bad guys there. And it was great because you could actually, we would tie up in the lee of the island because there was still wind and water from the other side. But it was great because you could actually go and swim and you could kind of get clean that way because we didn't have showers or anything. So that was good. So after the 2 months, we were then sent to Sea Float. Sea Float, as I said, there was an operation. It was actually formed in June of 1969. The Navy took 12 AMI pontoons. They anchored it in the middle of the Cuolong River. You might hear me, I say the Song Cuolong. Song means river in Vietnamese, so I call it either way. They were in the middle of the river there. They had housing for SEALs, UDT. They had Seawolf, which are Navy helicopter pilots, gunships, and crews. They had what's called Mobile Strike Force. These are guys that ran not little, but boats that inserted SEALs. All those people were housed there. PCFs we would tie up, but we didn't have any place to stay. We would sleep on our boats. But it did have a chow hall. It did have an operations center. Of course, it did have sea wolves that provide air support. So it was a pretty secure place. They would sometimes have a patrol boat would anchor at one end, and a Vietnamese Navy ship would anchor past the other end for security.
Question about some of the abbreviation, MST crews, what is
That's a mobile support team. They ran SEAL support craft. They were called light SEAL support craft, medium SEAL support craft, and heavy SEAL support craft. So they would insert SEALs as part of their missions.
the PGs and
The PGs are the patrol gunboat, like the Antelope Gallup class gunboat. You'll see a picture of it shortly. Also, you had in the area armed junks. These are Vietnamese Navy junks that came from some of the coastal groups, and they were put in sea float to help provide security.
VNN is Vietnamese Navy.
Vietnamese Navy, yeah, Vietnamese Navy.
Can you talk about Kit Carson?
Yeah, there were some troops in the area. Kit Carson Scouts are ex-VC that came over to the government, and they had a camp there. You'll see some pictures of them in just a minute. They also had regional forces there, which is kind of the Vietnam militia. They were in a fort, and they provided troops to provide security. When we got there, Seafold had been in effect for 8 months, and they were very successful in encouraging people to come back to the area. You can see on the right side, actually a little village grew up from virtually nobody to 4,600 people. They had a barber shop, they had a restaurant, they had a boat repair shop, they had an axe grinding shop. The Navy sailors built a school. So it was like a little town that was right across. Also, they had, beside the fishermen that came back, there were woodcutters. With the defoliation around Sea Float, there were a lot of dead trees. So they were cut down, and the people came in, put in a charcoal kiln. They basically made charcoal, ship it to Saigon. So they created, kind of a business for the people there. The lower right shows one of these Vietnamese basically junk force boats. These are armed junks, again, to provide security. The picture just next to it is the Vietnamese Navy provided a hospital ship to provide medical support to the people that were living there. Despite the fact that it was fairly secure. Yes, question?
The sea float, can you point on that map where it was?
Yes, it's right in the middle of the Song Kulong, right about there, the river. Yeah.
Thank you.
And where's the Kamau Peninsula?
The Kamau Peninsula would be, this area is the Kamau Peninsula. Yeah, and then the human forest is basically all that. Yeah. As I said, despite the fact that it was fairly secure around Sea Float, the entire Kamau Peninsula was all VC controlled. We would see these signs around, tacked up on trees, and Tudia means basically land of death, so sort of here you die, so they would tack this up all around Sea Float. As I said, we were there for, this time, really only about 2 weeks. Right after we got there, there was an ambush of a Vietnamese ship. Just to show you the kind of things that happened, the Navy had a group of OV-10 Broncos. They were used in the Persian Gulf Wars as well. Basically, based at Ben Tui. These are Navy pilots, and you would call in, they would fly, they would be there in a matter of minutes. They flew in, made a strike at the ambush zone. The Sea Wolves that were at Sea Float, they made strikes. What you see below is PCS 17 and 36 went to the Kit Carson Scout camp and picked up a reaction team, and we inserted them into the ambush zone. So we put them in the ambush zone. That's as we were backing out after they had gone through and collected their material. That's at their camp. What you see there are B-40s, B-50s, which are a larger rocket that the North Vietnamese made. You'll notice they are a lot of them are in launch tubes. What you see a lot of tubes there. Those were rockets that have been expended, have been shot. Because of the defoliation, they couldn't get right up the riverbank to shoot at you. So what they would do is they would set up these launch tubes. They would run a wire back from the riverbank to a bunker or to the jungle. And then they had aiming stakes, and when a boat came by, they would take the batteries, the wires to them, and launch the rockets. That was kind of the tack they took at
Photo upper left, what type of vessel is that?
yeah, the LSSL is a landing ship, special large. It was kind of a small, it could carry infantry, but it did have guns on it, so that was one that would be anchored in the area as for support.
That's an OB-10 in the upper right there.
Yes. Okay. Do the Marines fly those? Do Marines fly those?
Marines had a lot, I had 3 squadrons of them,
Okay.
one active duty and 1 reserve squadron.
Okay. They're quite an amazing aircraft. They're very effective.
It's called a COIN, counterinsurgency aircraft.
Right.
Turboprop powered, carried smoke rockets, which you see one being fired there in that picture, and 4 30 caliber 7.62
Yeah.
machine guns in the nose.
Yeah, they had a lot of firepower there.
Radiant sponsons underneath.
Yeah. So again, we were there actually just for 2 weeks. The other things that we did during those 2 weeks is we would do what we call waterfront patrols. We would travel around seafloat dropping concussion grenades. That was our way to defend against swimmer sappers. That's an American PG that was there. They usually would anchor at one end. The Vietnamese Navy ship would anchor at the other end. And despite the fact that basically the VC used these rockets and tubes, there were some of these ships got hit pretty badly by rockets. One of the patrol craft there, the Navy ones, was hit by it was hit on both the starboard and port side with these B-41 heat rounds. And so they had some severe damage and people were wounded. So you could, from the river, even though the Kulong is a large, wide river, they could indeed get a boat if they were lucky. Swift boats were fairly fast, and I think that helped us a lot. We did tug and barge escorts. They were trying to build a base across from Seafloat, which was, they call it solid anchor. They wanted to get a land base. But the area is all soft soil. And so what they did is they literally brought in barges, civilian tugs and a civilian construction company brought in sand and put down sand down there for foundations. We wanted escorting these guys a lot because they were slow, and so we would escort them through the rivers. One thing we did do is we inserted during those 2 weeks what's called Mobile Strike Force or Mike Force Montagnards. We inserted them on the east side of the Kulong. What we would do is we insert them, we'd go back and wait, and while I was waiting, I saw some sampans evading down the river. So we got underway, chased them. They went in a small canal. We basically went to follow them, and that's when they were going on the north side of the Kulong. From the south side, that's when we noticed that we were being attacked. There were B-40s and automatic weapons fire. And the reason you knew that is you could see green tracers go by. So it was definitely the bad guys. We backed off, suppressed fire, and when we went back into the canal, we found there were 6 sampans of medical supplies and clothing. So there had been a supply effort that they were trying to do across the Kulong River. Again, we were basically only there for 2 weeks. We then went to Ha Tien. And Ha Tien is a city that's on the Gulf of Thailand. It's at Ha Tien, that kind of shows you the town. There was what the Navy called an advanced tactical support base, where they put some pontoons there, and there they had basically hutches, or hooches they call them. So basically the crews of, there's a PBR division, 10 boats were operated there. There were 4 river mine sweeps. They were there. We would tie up there, but there were usually 4 PCFs, but we didn't, we lived on our boats. We didn't have any place to go.
Where is that on the map?
On the map, Ha Tien is right here on the map.
It's a long ways from home.
Near Cambodia.
Well, it's right on there are parts of the Yangtan River and the Vinte Canal where the border is literally 3 or 4 feet away. So you're right along the Cambodian border. Yep. This base, they had Sea Wolves, so they tried to get air support wherever they were stationed on the LST. When we arrived there, there had just been a number of ambushes. There were 3 PCFs that were hit, there were 2 minesweeps that were hit, and there was 2 PBRs were hit. What happened, what was happening is that the North Vietnamese Army decided to use what we call was a rocket team. They basically they were using handheld B-40 rockets, the Russian RPG-2s, and because the river and the canals are very narrow, they would get right up to the edge of the bank, and they were able to accurately hit these boats. That was the bow of the PCF-96. It was hit by 2 B-40 rockets almost simultaneously, and it kind of gives you an idea what was going on. The damages were pretty significant. 1 U.S. Navy sailor was killed who was on the minesweep, the river minesweep, and 19 sailors were wounded in those 4 episodes. The only good thing about that is after the 96 boat got hit, there were some PBRs in the area. They came in and basically sprayed down the area, and of course PBR sailors, they went and jumped on the beach and followed, and they found there were a dead NVA, and they found a rocket, and they found blood trails going back to the jungle. So after that, we were never attacked, at least not while I was there. So that was the good news for that. Our jobs were doing either 2 things. We did a day patrol or a night patrol. Usually we'd do 4 of these waterborne guard posts at night, 4 nights in a row, all night long, like 12, 13, 14 hours. We would set up an ambush. We would just beach the boat, tie it up, and the one thing the Navy did is they gave us these ground sensors. You would put them in front of your boat, and when people came by, what it would do is it would trigger the sensor, and based on the number that you heard the beeps, you knew which one was triggered. So we would do that every night, and in the morning you'd go retrieve them and take off. So we'd either do a 12-hour day patrol or we'd do an all-night waterborne guard post. Questions? Or?
Yeah, I got a question about the Huey Sea Wolves. Were those Navy?
Those are all Navy, yes.
Okay, and then what kind of air support did they give you? Were they gunships that could give you close air support?
The Navy Sea Wolves were not like the Army gunships, like the Cobras. What they did is they had 50 caliber machine guns actually mounted in the side of them, and so they were used for gunfire support, but they didn't have the formal like a Cobra gunship. They weren't like that.
So if you got into a big scrap, could the OV-10 act as forward air controllers in the morning and bring in jet?
That would be possible. The main thing here, though, is these sort of firefights were very short, so there wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of long contact. Yeah, that didn't really happen. You got a question? Oh, sorry.
Oh, who do you want? Okay.
Go ahead.
So, what is the biggest thing that has ever happened using those ground sensors? Like, did you have, encounter?
For us, we were lucky. We never had anybody trigger them, so that was good.
Okay, what was your main role in using those? Just protection so people could
Yeah,
sleep
yes.
at night? Or
Yeah, because if you can see the terrain there, it's very flat.
Yeah.
There's not much vegetation, and so you were always susceptible in the middle of the night. You were susceptible to have somebody come up on you. I know one PCF, actually, some people came up and they got hit with a B-40 in the bow while they were at a waterborne guard post. So it was basically to help protect you. Yeah. And so we would do, during the day, we would day patrols.
You have another question?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So 4 nights, 4 24-hour days, you had to sleep in there. Who did you put in charge?
Well,
Did you sleep adequately?
Well, what we did is at the night patrols, we normally split up the crew into 2 watches. And so we'd have half of the crew on watch, and the other half could get some rest, could sleep a bit. So, because we had to do things during the day too. You had to maintain your boat, you had to do stuff like that. So we were working, 20-hour days or whatever. So we tried to get some rest there. We didn't actually have a place to sleep at this ATSB, so sleep on the boat when you could. Any other questions? Okay. I want to show, it's really pretty, this whole Yangtan River is very interesting. The people that live there, we felt pretty secure. which is on the Vietnam side of the Yangtze River. They were a Buddhist sect called Hoa Hao. And they actually had their own army back in around World War II and stuff. They had their own arms, they paid taxes. They did succumb to the Saigon government in the 1960s, but the reason they hated the Viet Cong and the communists is their religious leader was actually kind of lured into a meeting, and then he was killed and his body was disposed of. And that's back in like 1939. So they had long memory. They hated the communists. So we always felt fairly secure. That's a little Hoa Hao village on the upper left called Tra Pho. On the right, you see that's one of their temples. Their flag, interesting, their flag was brown. They figured brown was sort of the symbol of all the colors. It's like all the religions, and that's what they used, yeah.
Why do they have a cross on the Buddhist temple?
It's because that was their, one thing about some of these religious sects is they kind of combined different religions, whatever, but they, so it wasn't, they weren't Christian, they were Buddhists, but they had a cross there. Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Below, for me, the interesting thing was you could see the French forts, French villas that were around the area. Here you have basically the farming was done by water buffalo, and you would see these little kids basically manhandling these water buffalo. Here they're taking them down to the river to wash them off. Just amazing that they just took care of it. And then we did these days. That's the Vinte Canal, the end of it. This is the west end of it. You can see the lock has been destroyed. It had been operable back during the French had it, but it was destroyed during the war.
So they had a series of locks on some of these canals?
The Vinte, it used to, not anymore. But it's pretty much a straight
Is that
shot.
during the French
Yes,
colonial
during
period
yes,
that they
yeah.
installed those?
Right. So next mission we were assigned, we went back to Sea Float. And at Sea Float, had one mission where we did 3 boats. We sort of reconnoiter up a canal. Picture in the upper left, that's the canal we went into. And the picture on the right shows we went about as far as we could go. You could see the vegetation is literally right at the boats. So we went up as far as we could go, and then we would sort of nose into the bank and back up and back out. When we did go there, we did find there was a sign, and actually the sign's on the table. It was a Vietnamese message warning people it said, "Forbidden to run motors day and night." So we knew that the VC were using that for communications. We told the Naval Intelligence Officer, he said later the SEALs went in and set up an ambush, and they found a bunch of VC that went through there. We did all the other kinds of things. We did the tug escorts. The other main thing that happened is finally Sea Float was attacked by swimmer sappers. They went in and we were scrambled. We were tied up at Sea Float when this happened. They sighted bubbles and things, so we went ahead and basically dropped concussion grenades. And at the end of all that, there were 4. They found 4 bodies, and they had been killed with 63 pounds of TNT. And so they did not succeed in blowing that up. That's just a picture from online of sort of sappers there. So anyhow, our next thing, we then traveled. So we were there a month at Sea Float. We did other duties, worked with SEALs, other troops, so we'd insert them, extract them. But what we did then is we went to Antoy, which is the headquarters of COSF 13. We had to travel 105 miles across the Gulf of Thailand to Antoy. And we were going there for what the Navy called a 2-week RAV, a restricted availability. And what that means is, hooray, we do not have to operate for 2 weeks. So we, what would happen is the Tutuila there on the right, that is a repair ship. They'd put the boat up on skids. They'd check the propellers, the shafts, the hull. They make major repairs. So, and the crew didn't have to do too much. I think the crew would have maybe some duties assigned. We got to live on the APL-30, which is a barrack ship. In Navy parlance, it's called a non-self-propelled ship. It did not have any engines, but it did have for us. Hot food, hot showers, and air conditioning. So it was a great place to be. So those 2 weeks were outstanding. And I didn't have a lot of duties. So I had a friend. They were building a base on Fuquoc Island, and I was able to go see my friend. Had a nice little tiny officers club. Went over there. So that was nice. So after 2 weeks. We then, and one reason, just to make a mention, one reason why they were doing this 2-week RAV is they were about to turn over the boat to the Vietnamese Navy. So I think the Navy wanted to spruce it up, make sure it was all painted and everything was repaired and replace all the missing things and all that good stuff.
Like that's gonna fend off the bullets.
There you go. So then it was back to Ha Tien. And Ha Tien, we went there. We did 2 weeks of patrols. We did day patrols and night patrols. There was a new base there. The Navy Seabees had completed the base on the east end of Ha Tien. You can see there's a swift boat there. We were able to dock there. The great thing about the base is it actually had facilities. It had places where you could sleep. They had a chow hall. It was really great compared to what it was before. The one thing that happened, though, is that they had moved, the ATSB had been dismantled. The PBR River Division, there were 10 PBRs that had been stationed there the last time we were there. They were all moved to other places on the river. So it was just the PCFs, the US ones, and then there were Vietnamese boats that were operating. One night while we were on a waterborne guard post near, this is a Vietnamese Special Forces camp. It's on the upper part of the Yang Tan. It's actually back up in here. Yeah, back up in there. It's at a place called Vinh Nha. It had what were called SIDG troops, the Civilian Irregular Defense Group troops. These were, originally they were usually minorities that the CI had set up, and they were now have been taken over by Vietnamese Special Forces. They were in this base, they were Cambodian and probably Hoa Hao. That were in that fort. Their families were in the fort, and so they lived in the fort. We were doing this night ambush. We docked, and then all of a sudden, as I said, we'd have half the crew would watch, and the other half could get some rest. While we were there, these rockets and mortars came over the boat into the fort. So we backed up, moved out of the way, and then I called the Naval Operations Center in Ha Tien. I said, NVA, we can see them. They have mortar teams that they're attacking this fort. For permission to fire, and they said no. At this time, despite the fact that the political situation changed a lot in Cambodia, Prince Sihanouk had been deposed. Lon Nol had taken over, wanted to kick out the North Vietnamese. North Vietnamese then attacked the Cambodians, and so there's a lot going on in Cambodia. But nevertheless, technically, it was still a neutral country. We were not allowed to fire into it. It's kind of a strange war.
That neutrality as a sanctuary from which to fire into.
Right, and that's what the North Vietnamese were doing. Yes, exactly. Okay, so like I said, we were there 2 weeks, and then our mission changed a little bit. We went out to basically train a Vietnamese crew on our boat. We did gunfire. We did some patrols around Cambodia. That's actually Prince Sihanouk's, one of his palaces that's there. I got to go on a Cambodian gunboat. That was very interesting. But then we went to Antoy, and on June 10th, 1970, we turned over PCF-17 to the Vietnamese Navy and became Vietnamese Navy PCF 3815. So that was their boat. Okay, after that, I didn't have a boat, so I was sent to Ha Tien to go pick up another boat. So I went, I was able to catch a ride, went to Ha Tien, and became ONC of the 88 boat. The one thing about that, we still did the day patrols and the night ambushes, but one of the things that was evident to us, it was relatively quiet in the area because what had happened is in the meantime, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam and the Khmer military had actually gone back and had resumed government control along the Cambodian border. So it was pretty quiet when we were there. We were there for a month. I don't remember too much that went on. Above right there, That's actually, it's an exposure, but it's actually a picture of an ace, which shows what happened when Puff the Magic Dragon would shoot. This was a AC, U.S. Air Force, AC-119. This was a 119 ship, yeah. They had 4 or Gatling miniguns, each of which would shoot 2,000 to 6,000 rounds per minute. So when you had all 4 of those shooting, they would circle the target. All the guns were on one side, and the pilot would just lean out one side, would just circle that. That's kind of a time exposure, but in real life, you did see this cone of tracers that were as they circled around, and it was really so many rounds. It actually looked like the rounds were going from the ground to the air because there were just so many coming down. That's me. I got basically a tiger stripe uniform. Those were what the SIDG would normally wear. The one episode I wanted to just mention is, as I said, the people there, at least we thought they were pretty friendly. There were kids that were along the riverbank. We were entering the river for a patrol. And one thing about the patrols, we had to use sea rats. They gave us sea rations, and I particularly didn't like it because as an officer, I had to buy mine. Everyone else got sea rats. So I would pick the one that had the B1 units, which had fruit. And then I took the main course. This was ham and eggs in this one, and I threw it on the riverbank where the kids were, and the kid picked it up, so it was ham and eggs, and he threw it back. So he knew it was pretty crappy there. Okay, so the one thing that was nice about being there and it being so quiet is Hatien is a great little town. We got to spend some time in Hatien. It's a French colonial town. You can see the architecture. They had restaurants, barbershops. It was really a nice place, and I got to spend a little bit of time there from time to time. So after the tour, then I would take the 88 boat to Sea Float because I was going on R&R. Upper left picture that's me and my jungle greens and my orders in my pocket. There, they didn't really provide you with transportation. You just had to get your way to Tan Son Nhut. So I was able to hitch a ride on it's an Army helicopter. He took me to Binh Tui. I don't think he was going to Binh Tui, but one thing we found in Vietnam is that the people there would always give you a hand. I mean, they're very helpful. So he was an Army pilot. He said, sure, I'll take you to Binh Tui. I then got on an Army Chinook, got to fly over the Delta, which is pretty amazing area, and then got to Tan Son Nhut. Went to the Annapolis BOQ, and so next morning I went to get my R&R. I shaved my beard a little bit before I went, and this Army first lieutenant said, "You can't go in R&R." I said, "Why not?" He said, "You have a beard." And I said, "Well, Admiral Zumwalt says I can have a beard," and the Army guy said, "Doesn't matter." So the Army guy in starched greens told me he couldn't do that. So I shaved off the beard, but I did wind up going to Hong Kong. So anyway, that was the R&R. When I got back from R&R, then it was back to Sea Float. This time I wound up being ONC of PCF 45. Just a couple of things to mention that happened while we were there. We were there for 3 weeks this time. You see in the river those stakes. What you see is in a lot of the rivers in Vietnam, they had these stakes that were like for fishing stakes. And so what happened is we were going back to extract some troops, and we had to go around the stakes to go down the river, and we went past the stakes. That's where we had this big puff of white smoke, and then the adrenaline kicks in and everything goes in slow motion. You could see the rocket come out of the bushes in slow motion. It hit the boat in front of me, and it dropped in the water. It was a dud. It just hit the hull and just dropped in the water. It didn't explode. So sometimes you were lucky. That was a good one. We did an emergency extraction of seals. Those are kind of typical seals that were operating down there. The one other time we had a major, we had more swimmer sapper attacks. There was on first one, the sapper had been killed together with a bunch of TNT. The second attack, we had been scrambled. They used concussion grenades, and they found three sappers had been killed. Despite the fact that all these sapper attacks on Sea Float failed, they did in fact succeed. There was a Vietnamese naval vessel, another LSSL, that had been anchored, and they were able to put a mine on the hull, and it exploded, and the boat sank in about 10 minutes. So they could be successful, but at least we were very vigilant around sea float. The last picture there, the reason I put that there is I read later that there was a Navy had dolphins work to attack swimmers. And when we were at sea float, there were some pens by the riverbank, and we were told, don't drop any concussion grenades there. So I wondered what that was. They never told us what it was. Later, I looked on basically organization chart of sea float, and they had what they called a water dog unit. So I was pretty sure that was the dolphin. The interesting thing, the last thing that I was involved in sea float before we left was we were on a river, and all of a sudden we started seeing sampans and junks coming out of the Kamau Peninsula. Now the south part of the Kamau, they were all VC villages. These people were slave labor that were kept in these villages to do either fishing, farming, or doing munitions, whatever it was. They were told, if you leave, we'll kill you. And yet, what we saw is on this one time is there was 96 people came out and 26 sampans and junks because they had basically, I guess, had enough of being in. So it showed that the Navy effort to keep supplies from coming to the Viet Cong were very successful, because the people that were there were so fed up with that they actually left even under threat of death. The interesting thing about that is when they came out, one woman was very, very pregnant, and they put her on a swift boat and get her to sea float because she was definitely due. And they put her on a swift boat, and she basically squatted down. She dropped her baby down her pant leg, and baby and mother were fine. So Vietnamese peasants are very hardy. So, okay.
Could I ask about
Sure.
the dolphin?
Yeah.
The dolphin looks like it has a camera.
That's a newer picture from that's in Bahrain, but they were doing different things. But they were trained to attack swimmers, even in Vietnam. They did have one
Is that a camera or a scope? Or what?
That's probably a camera. Because they would attack swimmers by actually going in with their nose and hitting them that way. That was how they killed the swimmers. Any other questions?
Yeah, another question.
Yes, go ahead.
It's really a more general question, perhaps for the end, but I'm wondering how many PCFs and PCEs were deployed during this time? And the main thing that stopped the interdicted supplies, and fatality rate?
There were almost 100 PCFs that were in Vietnam. Most of them were Mark I's. As far as fatalities, a lot of them got shot up, but they would be repaired. So there were some people that were killed, particularly down in the Kamau. There were some incidents there early on in 68, 69. But as far as damage, there were only 3 PCFs that were sunk by combat, but 3 were sunk by weather. So it was actually almost as dangerous, depending what the weather was, than actually being on the rivers. And I said there were some deaths, but they were pretty few. Basically, we had our speed and our firepower, and in areas like at sea float, if you had a wide river, it made it wasn't so bad. Okay, after sea float, our next assignment was on the Basak. It was called a Blue Shark operation. We were stationed at a coastal group. This is a Vietnamese Navy coastal group at Long Phu. You could see their junks back there. They would search sampans and that. We didn't have a place to live on the base, but we would live on our boats. The one thing we had to be careful, though, is the tide in the lower Basak was actually it would leave 10 to 12 feet in 5 or 6 hours. And so if you tied up your boat, you had to have somebody stay on it because you had to make sure you'd loosen your line or you'd wind up hanging upside down. The 2 bottom pictures, first of all, when we were going to do an extraction of some regional force troops. And while we were there, there was this little sampan with this little girl and her grandmother. My crew gave them some apples and soap. I mean, one thing is the Navy sailors were always really good about, and this is in the middle of a VC controlled area, but they could understand between civilians and bad guys, so they gave her this stuff. We went to pick up the regional force troops. You can see them, so they climb in on the cargo net that's in the front. They got on there, we extracted them, and the 2 boats, that shows you, we had about 50 troops in addition to our crew on each boat. So then we started going, we were in a canal in the middle of Dung Island, which is a VC controlled area on the Bossack River, lower Bossack River. While we were basically traveling up there, then we got ambushed. On the map, Dung Island this is the Bossack. This is Dung Island, and you can see there's actually canals that go all the length of Dung Island. So this area is all VC controlled. This area is all the Long Tuan secret zone, all VC controlled. This area is all VC controlled. That's the Tan Phu secret zone. So there were a lot of, particularly on the river mounts, they were controlled. Anyhow, so we're going down there, and then the same thing, puff of white smoke. Your adrenaline kicks in, and then in slow motion, I don't know how it works that way, but slow motion, you could see the rocket come out, and it happened to hit between my boat and my friend's boat. And we had three rockets and automatic weapons fire, and so but we went through the zone, and then we exited. After we exited the ambush, we actually got ambushed again 2 kilometers on. But anyway, I asked my engine man who was on the back 50 caliber machine gun, he stopped firing. And I went back and said, why did you stop firing for a while? And he said, well, I was firing and there was a sampan with this little old lady right between our boat and the ambush. And he said, so I didn't want to harm her, so I just stopped firing. So whatever you hear about the Navy, particularly some John Kerry's statements about them being war criminals, that's all just bull. They were very, very conscious of who the good guys and the bad guys were. After that, after we had the ambush there, we had to go to Ben Tui. Now, I'm about an hour. Can I speak for a few more minutes, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm finished.
Oh, okay. I'm close. I'm at the end. Okay. So this was an episode. We went going up there. Both of my engines died. It turned out that we had gotten fuel from Sea Float that had water in it. And by this point, it blew the port engine and it blew all the injectors on the starboard engine. So we went to Bintui. They tied up at the Krishna, which was a repair boat. Went up to the repair office. I said, my boat's damaged. I need to be fixed. And the repair officer said, we can't do it now. We've got a long list of boats. We've got to go and get. We have all these boats we're turning over. We have to fix up. And I said, okay. So I got a ride to the base of Bintui, where there was a Naval Operations Center. Now, the boss of all the repair ships is NAVSEPAC Saigon. And I basically got on the phone. I called NAVSEPAC Saigon, talked to the duty officer. I said, the Christian won't repair my boat. I said, we need to. I'm down in a VC-controlled areas. We need all 3 boats. It's dangerous not to get it repaired. And the guy said he'd see what he could do. And what he did is NAVSEPAC Saigon ordered the captain of the Krishna to come into the NOC and basically told him repair my boat. So that was good. Like I said, in some days I might get you court-martialed, but I guess that didn't work.
Not during the war.
During the war, yeah. The one thing they did do, the Christian crew, we were repairing systems and things while they were finishing the repairs, and they pulled a surprise inspection on our boat. Now here's a boat, we have 5 guys living in it for months at a time, and so they want to have an inspection. So guy went to the refrigerator, pulled out this bottle, was a whiskey bottle, kind of aha, and then it kind of it turned into a dud because he opened it, it was water. So anyway, so that was that. Back to Fulushark, these are the last operations we had. We helped defend a fort that was under attack with our mortars. We went ahead and we were given direct fire. We went up to one of the secret zones, and the VC were building bunkers, and we went in and did mortar fire. The last patrol we had was there's a river called the Song Mitan, which is this river here, southwest of Bossack. And we did PSYOPs, we blew up bunkers, And the interesting thing about that is on the way out, my friend, who was in the boat in front of me, got the PSYOPs broadcast and basically said something to the effect of, "Attention VC, the last boat is Bigelow, and this is his last trip, and this is your last chance to get him." So there was humor in that, and of course I'm not sure if the Vietnamese spoke English.
They're all black.
There you go.
Hit him.
There you go. So at the end, basically the end, back to Cat Low, one thing was good is we had so many officers and not enough boats, so I was told I could go home a little early. So I was able to contact the personnel men there at the base. I said, my dad's going to retire from the Marine Corps with 30 years as a Master Gunnery Sergeant, E9. I said, he retires on September 25th. Is there any way I can get there? And the personnel man said, I'll cut you orders, but you have to get a flight. So I was able to call Mac, I got a flight, and he cut me the orders. So I left on September 22nd. The interesting thing, though, about all the other picture shows, they were the last boats from Seafloat that came in there while I was there. And then right after that, they disestablished it. So when I came in country, there were 5 coastal divisions, all operating up and down the coast. When I left, there was 1 left. After 11 got disestablished, and that was all disestablished actually over in December 1st. So it was
September 22nd, 70s?
90. I mean, no, 70, yeah, 70, yes, September 22nd, 1970. And that's, like I call it, that's basically, so it was the twilight of my cruise. It's also the twilight of swift boats in Vietnam. So any questions?
Did you have the same crew the whole time?
No, what happened is when, like the officers, when you went on like R&R or whatever, they would take you off a boat and then another officer would come on. So I had to crew PCF-17 from December of 69 till June of 70. So that was the longest time. Then the crew was on the 88 boat and the 45 boat. Those were probably several months at a time.
So what was your rank?
I was a Lieutenant JG.
Lieutenant JG, and you were the commander.
Officer in charge.
Of 3.
No, what we were is, we were the officer in charge of our boat. Now what the PCFs
You had
did,
an officer on each boat.
I had an officer on each boat. And what we do is if we did a multi-boat operation, 1 officer would be selected to be in charge. So there's 1 officer per boat. Yep.
So I can't help but see a parallel, which I've seen before, with Afghanistan, in which we just turn over equipment. But I'm just curious, so this is the Republic of Vietnam, they are communists that took over, and,
Eventually, but it took them several years.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it didn't happen right away. Didn't happen right away.
We were actually leaving boats for the good guys then?
Yes, we were, yes.
Okay.
Wasn't the Taliban, no.
And this was what year?
1970.
70.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Wasn't Zula's son on one of your boats?
Yes. He was on a PCF. He operated on the Yangtan River before I got there.
Okay, thanks.
You have questions?
Well, the thing which strikes us so is everyone, depending what service you were in and where you were, experienced the war so differently. You know, I learned so much about your experiences, even though we operated the 25th Infantry Division, a little more north than you. You didn't experience anything like what you did,
Right.
because we were all on land.
Right.
And then, you know, for those, Bear and Nellie, if he was here, you know,
No,
the
he's playing
A6
golf in
pilots.
Arizona.
There you
But
go.
A6 pilots,
Yeah.
you know, Chuck Robbins flew helicopters. I mean, I can see lots
Yeah.
of Vietnam hats.
Yeah. Well, it's all your point of view. It's like when we had that ambush on the Bossack River. I had the advisor to the regional force troops there. He was standing outside the pilot house on the left side. That's where the ambush came. And later he told me, he said he never felt so naked with all this gunfire and firefight. He said, I'd much rather be in a bush in a firefight, not sitting on the boat. I said, well, I prefer the boat, not the bush.
So Lou would like to present you one of our challenge
Oh,
coins, just to
okay.
commemorate.
Oh,
And
thank you.
so much.
Thanks.
for joining us. One more thing. If any of you have an interest in the Civil War, we have a marvelous opportunity for you. With Bob Mulder, Bob, raise your hand, with our official Civil War Annex. Bob has the most marvelous collection of Civil War artifacts at his house, and he loves to give a tour of it. And he knows the history of everything and can explain it. And it's not, he's in North Glen, so it's not far away, it's easy to get to. And he loves to have visitors. So I have a bunch of his handouts if you think you'd like to do that. Or bring a young student with you. You'll learn so much history for that.
Yeah.
And then just as a final thing, don't forget to pick up, we have a bunch of flyers here and the schedule for the speakers for upcoming, Vietnam War Symposium.
I just got one last thing to say. Some of the stuff I have on the table, you can take a look at. Also, there are 3 books that I'd recommend if you want to read and learn more about that. One is called Swift Boats at War. I've got a chapter in there, but it covers the whole period of the swift boats. So I think you'll find that interesting if you look at that. This basically says through the water and fire. That's from a PCF crew. That was actually the 96 boat that was hit. That's an interesting boat. And also there's one about the Nilo Hatien, which gives you a lot of good information about what's going on in Cambodia. So would recommend those.
In existence?
Yes, there are. There is, well, you saw the picture in the memorial. There is PCF 104 is actually there. There is a PCF boat at the Navy Yards in Washington, D.C., PCF 1. And then there was a swift boat that had been given to the Malta Navy, and it then was sort of salvaged and refurbished. And it's actually is part of the San Diego Maritime Museum, and you can actually go take rides. You can get rides on a swift boat if you go there.
Wonderful. It's $20, you go through the whole harbor. It's an hour-long cruise.
Yeah, it's nice, yeah.
Did it. It's in San Diego, right downtown, it's on the water.
Yeah, about the water, the maritime, yeah.
If anyone would like a little flyer for Bob's Civil War Annex store,